Hello everyone and welcome to the refined version of my PDF for the module Shape, where I will be taking you through the most pivotal moments of the module, as well as some of the key learning opportunities that I experienced and the moments that I felt were the most valuable for me throughout the module. So let's jump right in. So I actually decided to start with inserts from week 2, as for me the first week was all about easing in. It felt familiar and the concept of designing a PDF and researching was something that I was comfortable with. So I just jumped straight into week 2 because the first week was about warming up and getting to grips with what Shape would bring. Whereas the second week is where I felt we dove into some of the core ideologies and methodologies. So for me, the concept of UX was totally new, and I had never even heard of what it was. Therefore, being introduced to human-centered design and user experience design was really a key moment in the module for me. And we can see here that this is where I started to make connections with design thinking and UX research, and also what it meant to empathise with your audience. So as you can see here, the empathy mapping was imperative for me throughout the module in understanding and visualising my audience. And therefore here in the slide, this was the first time I had used it, which was a pretty pivotal moment for me, and it was also something that I came back to throughout the module, this method of empathy mapping. So creating personas and taking my empathy mapping and putting it into a visual really helped me to contextualise and to grasp the importance of the concept. It's all very well talking about something, but this exercise really helped me to visualise my problem solving after interacting with my audience. Adam Proctor's talk gave me confidence, and it also helped me to understand that design is not linear, nor is it cyclical. And this was very valuable. I think probably because I often put a lot of pressure on myself to create a perfect finished outcome, whereas this talk from Adam actually really helped me and allowed me to relax into the iterative process, which I feel forms the basis of all design. And now it was time to empathise. I would consider myself naturally an empathetic person. Therefore, the idea of empathising with my audience and putting myself into my audience's shoes was exciting to me. And we can see on this slide here that this was actually quite a key moment for me, as I decided to implement non-traditional methods of research in order to connect with my audience. Now, this is something I had never done before, and I had discovered I could do through the module of Shape. And I think it was this alternative approach that led me to understand that research can take various forms, which is why I've chosen to include it. I kept coming back to this quote throughout the module, I think probably because for me it underpins what empathy represents. It's not about me, it's about them, it's about the audience. And so after all of this research, I was really excited to finally get making. And prototyping was key in allowing me to sort of dispel the notions of a finished product, even though actually it felt pretty unnatural at first to create something so lo-fi. However, I quickly began to enjoy the snappy and immediate interaction and feedback from my audience. And here you can see that this is nowhere near polished, yet the concept is clear, concise, and easy to understand. And I think that's what I really loved about prototyping, how something so basic could be so impactful. And Craig said it best, empathy is an imperative tool to have as a designer. And I think it's something that I will carry with me and implement in my practice going forward. We then moved on to refining. And refining is something that I'm comfortable with, I'm pretty familiar with, I enjoy it too. Therefore, when the opportunity to edit came about, I was feeling confident. I was deeply analysing the teachings of Holly Lubbock and David Phillips in order to make my presentation dynamic, engaging, successful. However, after the webinar, I realised I had misunderstood the assignment. And this is how I felt when I presented my shiny new PDF. Instead of refining and editing my product, I had refined and edited my PDF. And to be honest, I felt frustrated with myself. However, after some reflection, I realised although I had applied the concepts and ideologies to the wrong task, I had actually fully grasped the values and the methodologies. I had just applied them to the wrong thing. And as David says, it's a skill, not a talent. And I think this week, for me, showed me that it's a muscle which I have to keep working and practicing in order to become and stay a successful presenter. A major milestone for me was putting all of my learning into practice. So applying the tips, techniques, and ways of working to my own project was exciting, and I think I felt the pieces finally falling into place. Harking back to previous concepts solidified their meaning in my head, and it actually made me feel as if I was truly understanding what it meant to be a designer. So here you can see that I was using journey mapping to visualise how my audience would receive their physical invites. Now this wasn't something that we were made to do, it was something that I chose to do because I felt I was finally grasping these concepts and understanding them enough to be able to apply them. And this process, the journey mapping, it really helped me further down the line when making design choices. And as I previously mentioned, all of the mapping exercises for me were pivotal in connecting and learning about my audience. And they were something that I see myself using within my personal practice in the future. Maps are essential. Planning a journey without a map is like building a house without drawings. And finally, a chance to get off screen. So the Falmouth face-to-face trip was a great reprieve from all of our digital learning and such a great experience in experimenting with analogue methods and getting to create something physical. I chose to include this here as I felt I really made some important discoveries about my personal practice and my way of working that will shape and pave the way for my future work and personal brand on the Falmouth trip, which is why I wanted to include it on this refined version of my presentation. So I left Falmouth on a high, which didn't last for long, as shortly after, disaster struck when my laptop fell to the floor and smashed. Seriously terrible timing, an absolute mess. So a few breakdowns later, and with the knowledge that there was no salvation for my laptop, I had to think like a designer and problem solve. Taking into consideration what James Stanford says here, I decided to focus on analogue ways of making work, as well as using the resources I had, thankfully an iPad, to finish the module and to keep going. And for me, I actually really enjoy making analogue work, which is something I've discovered recently. So I decided to jump right in and take it as a positive. I tried to be innovative and creative and use what I had to create textures and assets to use within my brief. Now, I feel like this was really pivotal for me as I proved to myself that I am creative, I am a problem solver, and I am a designer. Even though at times I felt that this wouldn't be what I was doing if I had my laptop, I tried to remind myself that I was making the best of a bad situation and also flexing my creative muscle to its max. And this was a really emboldening feeling, actually. So I tried to keep focusing on the positive and the incredible opportunity that I had to visit the Musée de Yves Saint Laurent in Marrakesh. I used this opportunity as a chance to observe and take inspiration from gallery curation. I made sure to pay close attention to layout, lighting, mood, and displays, and I was struck by how much I learned, actually. I wanted to take my observations and implement them into my brief, as I was designing an end of year show after all, so I was in the perfect place to do so. And as Saint Laurent says, fashion fades, style is eternal, which is why I chose to sort of disregard design trends or patterns and opt for listening to my audience and responding to their views and opinions when working on my brief. Bringing everything together was actually less overwhelming than I thought, but probably because I was limited in what tools I had available to me. So pulling in all of my research, my conversations, iterations, it led me to finalising all of my deliverables, which, as Claire Scully said in her lecture, I really must value. And this module, I have worked really hard on changing my mindset to value what I create rather than pick it apart. And so, taking Katie's advice, I actually really enjoyed mocking up my designs and putting them into situ. And I think that this was a really pivotal moment for me and key in me contextualizing all of my hard work over the module and appreciating what it had basically led me to. Bringing things to life also helped me to realize their value and the deep and thorough research that had gone into them all. I think it was really a nice exercise in seeing the culmination of all of my hard work. Which brings me to the end of the module. Shape has taught me the value of audience and context, as well as allowed me to break down the barrier between designer and user. And now I feel I'm leaving the module a more well-rounded, a more developed and empathetic designer who will definitely implement iteration, testing and feedback as a vital part of my practice. It's been a really interesting module. There's been a lot of highs and lows, some not necessarily to do with the module, but to do with technical issues. But at the end of the day, I'm proud with what I've presented. And taking Claire's advice, taking Katie's advice, I'm really trying to value that. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it, and see you soon.